You say, oh,
Well,
brother,
yeah.
we need to speak. Yeah, so I'm not really. I'm not really. Okay, let's do it this way. You used to be a Muslim, so I understand.
Yeah.
And then you left.
Yeah.
At what age did you leave?
It's quite hard to put a specific date on it when I really think about it. I started to become suspicious that Islam might not be true when I was about 14, 15 years old, as I started to read more and find out more about the world. I was still calling myself a Muslim, I was still praying, I was still keeping fasts. All the way until I finished my degree, I still called myself a Muslim. When I was 23 is the first time I told my whole family I'm not a Muslim anymore. I still believed in God, but I just didn't believe in the Islamic God. So then that's what, the seeds of doubt came from like 14, 15 age, but officially I was only brave enough to come out with it at the age of 23.
Yeah. But what was it that caused the doubts?
What caused the doubt is that when I read books about just generally the world and history and viewpoints, I realized that one, Islam is not the only viewpoint, and two, it's not the most convincing.
Okay.
So, at the end of the day, I realized that I go to school and in my class it's quite multicultural. There's a lot of Christians, a lot of Hindus, a lot of a couple of Jewish people as well. So I used to think they all think that their religion is true, and I think mine is true because my parents basically forced me to believe that, and their parents forced them to believe that. If I was to be a bit honest, I could only say that I can't be sure, and I don't think they can be sure, so we should really look at the facts of the matter. So the more I started to pursue and study different people's religions, I saw they all come down to the same thing. You're supposed to believe on faith, really, because the evidence used by any one religion pretty much can always be used for any other religion, apart from the texts, which are only the claim themselves.
All right, okay. So, and we'll move on to other subject, of course. Yeah? But to me, I often think that at age 14, 15, 16, what kind of possible information would we be privy to be able to establish doubt? What was that spark? What kind of evidence did you actually look at?
At the age of 14, 15, I wasn't a fully developed rational person. I was an emotional wreck, But
we all are.
But the fact of the matter is, my instinct told me that I haven't got a good reason to assume my religion is true, because that's not intellectually honest. Because I admitted to myself that the only reason I think it's true is because I was forced to believe it was true. I didn't engage my objective.
But that was not at the age of 15, surely.
No, that did occur to me then.
That instinctively you knew it was wrong.
No, instinctively I knew that the only reason I believed it was because I had been forced.
Right.
And
that's understandable.
That sent alarm bells. That's not a good reason. Because everybody else is in the same situation and they've got a different conclusion. So at best we're all on equal terms here. And none of us have an independent or objective way of verifying our belief system.
I understand.
So I said that we're all in the same boat. I believe Islam because I was forced. He believes Christianity because he was forced. It's likely to be that they're all false.
That's I can see the logic. But so how would we deal with people who have actually left one, joined another, left that one, joined another, if basically all the belief systems were the same? How would we explain that one?
Well, that's not difficult to explain because, like I said to you, when I officially came out as a non-Muslim at the age of 23, I still believed in God. Because I just was sure enough that I'm pretty certain Islam is not true. I still open my mind up to study other religions, and one by one I found out they're just as equally unlikely to be true. And then I still open my mind up to think of a deistic type of God, and eventually I grew out of that as well. I went through a phase of pantheism, panentheism, agnosticism. So I was open to a number of different possibilities even after declaring myself as a non-Muslim. So my explanation for why people jump around from religion to religion is quite simply that when they find out the religion they were brought up in might not be true or is unlikely to be true, they still can't necessarily shake off the idea that there must be something out there. So it feels it's intuitive to want there to be a higher power that controls and looks out for everything and will give us complete justice one way or another. We would like that to be the situation. So human beings are quite susceptible to search for another explanation, spirituality or another religion.
When I'm considering all this, I think to myself, my first point of call would usually be a yardstick, with which to determine whether what I'm thinking, based on the evidence or just intuition, whether it is correct or not. What yardstick did you use?
Well, I didn't have a yardstick. I could only go by, one, my natural instinctive thoughts, and two, the yardstick I would use is objective, some kind of objective way of looking at the situation. So by trying to do that, even subconsciously, because I was just reading intellectual books, it just occurred to me that if I am truly to be honest with myself, I can't use any yardstick I've been given from my community or my family or my upbringing in Islam, because that already invalidates the biasness that I would naturally have. So to only get away from that, I have to understand that I've only come this far in this religion and believe this much for these specific reasons which are out of my control. So coming up with a yardstick is something that, I don't know, I mean, I guess I've tried to have yardsticks, but I've had to change them and use different yardsticks for different situations, rational and emotional. You know, you can't use the same yardstick. So I'm not sure
I can
exactly
understand.
what you
I
mean.
can understand. Well, basically, you see, we are all looking for something. The fact that, you know, people go through phases of wanting to find something, or intuition tells them, look, there must be something, there must be something. Whatever it may be, each individual is different as to how they approach life, My view on that would be this, that if I were to take a yardstick, it would have to be based on evidence, Okay, I grew out of accepting the existence of a creator, as we would say, Now, me growing out of the idea, I'm going to call it an idea for our purposes, Me growing out of the idea would necessarily require me considering evidence which will lead me to that conclusion. So what evidence did you actually consider?
Well, when you say evidence, I didn't do this as a kind of rational, scientific, laboratory-controlled clinical trial.
No, of course not.
So this is my life we're talking about. As a child growing up
understood.
and developing, I didn't have that way of doing it, and I still don't have that way of doing it, because that would naturally lead to a naturalistic universe anyway in this day and age. But the yardstick of evidence, or the basis of evidence that I use, is quite simply what I told you already, is that I could only go by what was going on inside my head, me relating what's going on in my life, me having an explanation for why my life has come this way and I believe these certain things. And once I didn't need some proof to tell me that Islam is definitely not true, or some evidence to show me that, to cast doubt on Islam. All I needed was the honesty, me being honest with myself and saying the only reasons that I ever did believe in any type of God, especially a specific one, is because I've been forced to. Now, you might say that's not actually evidence, but that's my life and my life experience.
I appreciate
so
that, of course. But you are also making the admission that it was purely subjective.
Of course.
Right, okay. If it was subjective and no evidence had been considered, then perhaps if
No, when you say no evidence...
I'm asking.
No, the evidence that I did have is my life, every explanation and understanding of my history and day-to-day development.
Understood, That's okay, so there wasn't any independent evidence that you considered? Well,
that's personal experience, and that counts as evidence to me. In terms of outside of my life experience, there was also other evidence, like I said to you, that I found out that when I asked a Christian boy at school, what do you believe and why do you believe that? Well, we didn't actually ask him like that, but obviously these things came out eventually. So he would say, well, because Jesus this, that and the other, and I was about, so what, Muhammad this, that and the other, and we'd be like, yeah, but we go to church and they tell us this, and I'm like, yeah, but we go to mosque and they tell us this. So I just realized that it's all just stories that people have forced upon their children over generations, and it's equally true for all the religions I had any experience with.
So at that juncture, did you perhaps consider, okay, wait a minute, the Christian is saying this, my Maulvi Sahib is saying that, both cannot be right or both cannot be wrong, whichever it may be, and you think, okay, wait a minute, let me look at the sources and see whether there's any truth to what is being said. Did you consider that?
Not really.
You didn't?
No, not at that age.
Yeah.
At that age, I wasn't that interested, to be honest.
Of course.
I just had the instinct that I don't have a good enough reason to claim this stuff is true. And I only ever did say it was true was because I was forced. Because I happened to be born in a Muslim family. And because I could relate that to every other child I knew in my class, in my school, in my local community, and no one had any better explanation than that, which is we grew up in this kind of family and they told us this, so therefore we're that. I realized that there's nothing special about my religion, because I can't see anything special, and for a number of years I didn't really pursue or look into it. I was interested in much more
of course. No, this is where I find it odd, not only for you, for even me, that when we are considering issues, we sometimes have the tendency to dismiss things without actually having considered them seriously enough. And at that age, nobody does. We are too busy doing other things like playing football or some other, yes. So, but when we get to a certain age, like you said at 23, you made the announcement to your family that, look, no.
Well, by that time I had looked into enough things to
Right,
be more certain.
excellent. What is it that possibly, what kind of evidence did you view to make you even more firm in your conclusion?
Yeah, well, I went to university and I studied philosophy.
Yeah.
So I consider that gave me a good grounding in how to go about thinking and how to think properly.
Okay.
Being skeptical, being rational, referring to the physical reality, and also philosophy has a lot of abstract concepts in it as well.
Yes.
But they all have a place and a certain sphere of utility.
Yeah.
So there's other ways of thinking which do refer to the physical natural world, for example empiricism.
Yes.
So philosophy gave me a really good foundation in all the different ways to go around looking and thinking about things.
Yes, yes.
So by the time I got to the end of my degree, I'd spent some time debating, discussing, even arguing with Muslim people on my course and at university, and I started to get a picture of the type of arguments they come up with.
Yeah.
And I really wasn't convinced,
Okay.
even from day one. For example, one Muslim said to me once when I was at university, the Quran is definitely true because it talks about 7 heavens in the sky, and science has worked out that there's 7 layers in the atmosphere.
Okay.
Now, at that time, the internet was quite a new thing, but we had access to it. So I went and checked this out, and it made me laugh because all it said in the Quran was the 7 heavens above.
Yeah.
And this guy had extrapolated that interpretation to mean that there are 7 specific layers of strata in the stratosphere, in the atmosphere, and and I was like, bro, this is ridiculous. Just because the Quran said 7 in an upward direction, you are now using that tiny bit of, you can't even call it knowledge or information, it's just a random thing, because 7 heavens is something that a lot of ancient cultures and religions did used to say. So 7 heavens doesn't mean anything special for Islam.
Okay.
So when I saw that they used such a ridiculous thing and extrapolate into being a scientific fact, it was a very I knew straight away this is a dishonest intellectual tactic. It's completely dishonest. So that started to make me realize, let me check the other arguments. So every argument that I ever came across, specifically for Islam and Christianity and for pretty much any religion that I cared to look into, I found that there were all the arguments for them being true were based on extremely weak and dishonest foundations. And that's one example.
Why did you conclude that it was dishonest?
Well, because saying 7 heavens does not in any way at all tell you that there are 7 layers of the atmosphere. For example, if you thought that was giving you the information about the atmosphere, why didn't it say there are 7 specific layers in the atmosphere? Why did it just say 7 heavens?
Okay.
There's not enough specificity to relate the two things.
So are you suggesting that because the verse, in this particular instance, the example you used, because the verse is not detailed and specific enough for you, you are rejecting it on that basis?
Not just that, I just think that because there's a much better explanation, which is that some Muslim guy came along hundreds of years after, or at some point after, when science had worked this out, and then went back to the Quran and said, guess what, we use the number 7 pointing upwards, we can claim that we knew this stuff before the scientists did.
Okay.
And if that was true, why didn't scientists refer to your Quran to find that out? It's the last thing they referred to.
Absolutely. But is it not true also that there seems to be an element of conditioning here? And it's a valid question. You see, if I were to surmise here that the scientists collectively, would look at the natural world, and the last thing that they would want to consult are what they consider to be religious texts. So there seems to be.
That's not true.
If I can just finish answer, sorry.
Because in history they did used to consult them.
If I can, but let's just look at it.
Never helped
so,
them.
Not necessarily. You see, at the end of the day, if, for example, I looked at something, and let's just use the example you used, 7 heavens. Okay, if you are going to dismiss the current understanding, you still have to deal with what it says. Perhaps there is something else that needs to be understood. But my view here is this, that if I look at a particular paragraph in a book and I disagree with it, I certainly don't do what we commonly call throw the baby out with the bathwater. Now, is there a possibility that as human beings we have the tendency to do that without actually looking at the evidence, and that's why I pointed out about evidence at the start, is there a possibility that we as human beings, not necessarily only you, we as human beings can discount things because of our social conditioning? Is there a possibility?
Of course there is, but then that also would mean that Muslims themselves can't claim anything about it either, because they could just be a product of their social conditioning.
Well, then it's odd. If it is a question of social conditioning, then it would be odd for someone to come and say to you, wait a minute, we already had it in the Quran, because that is going opposite to what the social conditioning would suggest.
It's not, because the social conditioning is based around proving and assuming that this thing is true per se. So when you start people off from that position, they will consciously seek to interpret anything in the world and relate it back to that truth that they've already assumed.
Is there anything wrong with that?
Well, yes.
What?
Well, because you made an assumption about something being true without being able to test it first.
Excellent. Whenever we are making assumptions about what the universe contains, etc., are those valid assumptions?
Depends which assumptions.
Okay, let's assume that there is a creator.
Why?
Yeah? We ask why don't we? What evidence would we seek to establish it?
Well, you can do that if you want to, but my point would be, why? Why would you assume a creator? Because
no, I agree,
I don't
but
understand
it's merely an assumption. So, you see, whether
I could make the assumption that some magical tree is the creator of the universe.
I'll tell you.
What's the point in making random assumptions?
No problem. If you told me there's a magical tree, the first thing I would say is, Ansar, take me there. Let's have a look at this.
Take me to your God.
One second.
Take me to Allah.
1 second, I'm coming to that. You see, magical tree, yeah? You have attributed a limitedness to it. Yeah?
What? No.
A limitedness.
I called it magical. Yeah? There's no limit to it.
1 second. No, a tree is limited.
No, but now it's a magical one.
Well, if you are going to say magical, you'll define magical for me.
Well, don't you say the same about your God?
No, I don't.
All
Do
powerful,
you?
All knowing.
No. Again, these are generalizations, which I don't mind. I accept. Yeah. But what I'm looking at is actually addressing the evidence for what it is, rather than, as you rightly pointed out, looking at assumptions, yeah, and preconceived notions. And I sincerely think that, having conversed with so many people, a lot of that takes place. My view is this, that look, for anything to be discounted reasonably, logically and rationally, the necessary evidence in relation to that subject matter ought to be at least considered before excluding it.
Yeah, that's true. That's only true if I was positively saying that there is no God. Now, I don't say that. What I say is that the evidence and reasoning that I've heard from any theist has not been convincing. So I don't say that there's definitely no God. I just say that I'm not convinced that what you describe and explain exists.
Okay, I can live with that. If that is the case, Ansar, what do you think? And we come back to what I started, the original point. So what, in your estimation, is the yardstick you would use to require the necessary evidence to establish it for a creator?
I don't know.
Okay, so if we don't know, can we discount anything?
No.
So we should still consider everything?
Yeah.
Including all the scriptures that you have discounted already?
No, I just say that they're very unlikely to be true.
Ah, excellent. Why?
Because they're just full of contradictions, and they say silly things, and they're quite immoral, and they're quite and to me it looks that they're quite obviously written by human beings in a human language at a time in a human place.
No problem.
So I think that is much more a better explanation than inventing a magical dimension and a magical agency that does this weird stuff.
Right. I'm just following the thread here. Yeah. I agree with you that if you think the way you have thought, you would possibly come to the conclusion that you have arrived at. But what I am thinking here is that, okay, perhaps maybe if we consider it from another angle here, it might take us to a different route. So, as an example, if I were to tell you now, you told me at the age of 23, pretty much as after you studied philosophy, you came to the conclusion that all these were talking utter nonsense. Yeah?
I hadn't found any argument convincing.
Right. But now we are at a stage where, and you have rightly said, you have not totally discounted everything. What I am saying now, does that include all the religious texts?
No, I can't discount them 100%. It could still turn out that they're true and I was mistaken, and or that God tricked us in some way and made them look untrue when they actually were true. All these things are still technically possible.
Excellent. But what is the yardstick you are going to use to establish whether they were true or not?
When you say yardstick, this is a tricky one because when you talk, I can give I can give you a yardstick for a physical process, and I think this is likely to happen because my yardstick is evidence or statistics or some sort of physical thing. When you're talking about a magical dimension, how can I know what yardstick to use?
Actually, I never even talked about a magical dimension. I talked about the text, and they are not magical. Right. They are physical. We can actually assess them.
Yeah, the text is simple. So, if the text were borne out by scientific experimentation, meaning that everything they say is 100% proven by our scientific progress, I find that very convincing to suggest that these texts had all this